filmmaker, artist, mostly working with video and video installations, but also objects, and studied art at Cologne recently. But also I was interested in that you kind of started studying environmental sciences for geography in Graz. Maybe you can comment on that later. To maybe provide just a little bit of concept, since this is Landscape 3.0, I'm really interested in how your works, in all your works, you're really, the landscape is somehow the obvious character in it. So, and these landscapes are really somehow special. You know, something like violent geographies or post-apocalyptic, pre-human terrains come to mind. So can you maybe just enter us into your work through these landscapes that you're interested in, and to tell us maybe, you know, where you traveled and how did it come to be?
Okay. Like the landscapes, how I choose it, it always depends. Like the first point of me is like to isolate myself a little bit, and this is then that I'm landing somewhere in these kind of landscapes. And I started working with landscapes mainly in 2010 when I was doing my first storm hunting series, and I was like 3 months like just hunting one storm after another, and mainly it was about waiting in the middle of nowhere. And then it came upon that I started doing other projects on an oil platform, or in the Arctic, where we will see after one film, or in some kind of deserts places, just to isolate myself and try to communicate or doing a dialogue with inside the landscape.
Okay, so the first film that we're going to see, High Tide, is also a part of this, let's say, group of films that was filmed at one place. So can you tell me just briefly guide me through the films, or let's say the landscape or the geography where this was filmed as an interview to intro to the film.
No. So High Tide is one of 3 films. Like the first one was Reign of Silence, High Tide, and Low Tide, and they are all shot in the Arctic. And we were at sailing for 3 weeks around Spitsbergen. And the idea to go there was to see the impact of time on this, if there is a difference of time on, or how do you perceive time at this particular place. And then it was planned to do one movie, and at the end it was like 3 single shots, which each is working for himself, and we will see now like 7 minutes long movie. Like.
Yeah, okay. Good, so I suggest we watch High Tide. It's 7 minutes, 20 seconds, and 2013. we did get a bit seasick from this perspective, so next film we will try to watch with you. Okay, so you mentioned time as something that interests you, and this film, of course, like the others, have the thing that also comes to mind is this notion of deep time that we also discussed yesterday. Yeah. And can you maybe talk a bit about that?
I think, yeah, it's in like all these 3 films dealing with a camera attached on a boat or observing a boat and then drawing in the water. And like what interests me is in a way how you can make during this, in this landscape, like in this deep time, the human time visible. And then I discovered, as we were brought every day on and off the boat to the shore with a little zodiac, like a little boat that you can quite draw with it, like using really like a brush in these fjords, because the streams are very shallow, and you really have an effect that you see it for quite a while. And then I was starting experimenting with that, and then as a last work it was in high tide, where we used then the big vessel and mounted the camera on it and just started spinning. Like, this is not an excerpt, but we were doing for the shooting like 25 minutes, like just driving in a circle, and like we took out here just one.
This film, Reign of Silence, which you just mentioned, which is also in these 3, it's also a bit of a nod to the land art, because it also makes some kind of a intervention in the landscape itself. But here it kind of, you have a situation at the beginning and the situation at the end that are kind of the same, and then there is the intervention in the middle.
Exactly. So it is, I think, interesting when you have an image which is at the beginning and the same and the end more or less the same, and during this intervention it becomes something different, or it gives like this special spice, what we maybe now in this call the human time.
Here what also kind of is pretty fascinating, that it kind of creates a narrative and not much kind of happens, or there's this tension between, you know, being almost like seeing a documentary shot, but somehow something emerges from it, some kind of, let's say, story or something. Was that also something that you had in mind?
I think it came with the project. Like, the idea was really to drive, and we are the first 3 minutes where nothing, or more or less nothing, is happening. We're just driving with the boat up the current or up the stream, and then it is about this small intervention or impulse, like, and it is just like moving the steering wheel and then staying in this position and circling there.
Okay. Yeah, maybe we can. Maybe we should address one more thing that we talked before we jump to the next film. We talked yesterday about when we were kind of discussing what to do. We were talking about nature as a spectacle, and that's something also that you address in your work. So this nature that, or a critique of this kind of position that, you know, or this idea, the nature that exists as a something spectacular to watch. This idea of the sublime and the sublime nature. So it also connects to your new project, something with the dying rivers in a fluorescent color. Can you maybe talk a bit about this this kind of strand of the...
The idea comes as well, like for a new project I'm using like uranine, which is a kind of a tracer color for what you use for tracing water and wells and springs. And I did not start with the project yet, but it is on the way. And for me, what interests me there the most is as well the same as in High Tide or Reign of Silence, like this kind of visual image, what is at the beginning and the end, the same, and during there is happening something. Like in this new film, it will be like, it's just turning green, like fluorescent green for a while, but then it turns to its origin, and this intervention or short intervention, which is like just like very short on time, and then it's like gone again, like I think.
Okay. Maybe we should go to the second film. We might leave the stage for it. It's called Captive Horizon. It is 15 minutes or 14 minutes 38. It's from the 2015, and then we're back here to talk about it.
Okay.
Okay, so we're back. Can you tell me a bit where was this filmed? Seems that it's also one of the terrains that's...
The whole film is
Yeah.
filmed in Lanzarote, and yeah, I used a drone for that or a quadcopter, and it deals very much with the perception of the distance. Like, is it between micro and macro, like this jumping, like you're always like high above the earth, and then you're jumping in and out and actually having no real connection anymore, like, or losing it more and more. The beginning you still hear some steps and which then disappearing, like, and so you're not grounded anymore, and then like just floating around.
Yeah, so for me it was also a bit of a kind of shift in the way of the observation goes in your films. Like this first kind of works were a bit more direct, where this is kind of coming from from this kind of almost like a moment of controlling and surveilling and surveillance. So you mentioned that it was filmed with the drone. Did you work with this before, or?
No, this is my first project with it, and yeah, it was fascinating. Like just to realize what powerful tool that is, that you actually can take any image what you imagine, or you can go wherever. Like once I wanted to film a crater in the morning where it still was locked, the bar was down, and then I thought, okay, then I have to wait till they open it officially, and then I thought, no, actually not. Like I can just stay here and fly up and then doing my filming there, and so this was quite powerful experience in the way what you have there, or what opportunities this opens.
Can you also tell me a bit about this? For me, there's this moment here where it becomes almost like an abstract image. So we're actually in the real landscape, but somehow it seems fabricated. So this kind of connection this relation seemed for me pretty interesting. Did you manipulate the image, or was it really? Did you shoot it like that, or how did this go?
So actually everything is not manipulated except this one shadow what appears in, I think, the 5th shot. But when we're just like very close to the ground and then getting faster and faster, and then it becomes this natural flicker element, what I call it, and then like just speeding up and then like gaining height again.
Okay, to finish up maybe, to ask you about the future project. You mentioned something already yesterday that seemed pretty interesting. It's also in the whole story of following the landscape and following the elements, or kind of dealing with these natural things of nature in your way. So can you tell me something about that? Where are you going now?
So, yeah, the next project, like where I'm working together with Vanja Smiljanic, is like we already have been in 2012 at a total eclipse in Australia, and we're making kind of a time document. Like we had a steady camera for half an hour. It was shortly after sunrise, then came the eclipse, and then the second sunrise. So the film was called Double Dawn, and now we are working on the next eclipse, which is on the 20th of March on the Februrary Islands, together on a new point of view of this cosmic event.
Okay, thank you very much, Lukas.
Thank you.
Okay, so Lukas.